The desert night swallowed sound like a living thing. Lieutenant Cassandra Thorne pressed her body flat against the cooling sand eyes fixed on the Iraqi command post 300 meters ahead. She was 24 and already knew what it felt like to be afraid of dying. The compound sat low and angular against the horizon, barely visible, except for the generator's dull orange glow seeping through sandbagged windows. Intelligence said 6 guards. Intelligence had been wrong before. Behind her, 7 shadows moved through the darkness with practiced silence. SEAL Team 7, the best of the best. She was Navy intelligence, which meant she was supposed to stay back, analyze, advise. But this mission needed someone who could read Arabic documents in real time. Someone who understood what they were looking for. Someone expendable enough that command wouldn't miss them if things went wrong. Master Chief Garrett Sullivan materialized beside her, his face painted dark beneath night vision goggles. At 32, he already had that battle-scarred look of a man who'd seen too many operations go sideways. He held up 3 fingers, then pointed to the eastern approach. She nodded. 3 minutes to breach. Then chaos. The SEALs moved like water flowing around obstacles. One moment the compound was quiet, the next its guards were down, neutralized with the kind of precision that looked easy but took a lifetime to master. Cass moved in their wake boots, silent on concrete, rifle up and ready, even though her hands wanted to shake. The command center was exactly where the satellite imagery promised. Maps on the walls, radio equipment humming in the corner. And there on a steel desk beneath a flickering fluorescent light, exactly what they'd come for. Documents, files, evidence. Cass pulled out her camera and started photographing, her Arabic good enough to recognize what she was seeing. Prisoner transfer orders, locations. 7 American POWs that command swore didn't exist. 7 men who'd been written off as killed in action when they were actually being held in a facility the Iraqi army had built specifically to hide them. And worse, much worse. Purchase orders in English, weapon serial numbers that matched U.S. military inventory, communication logs showing American officers coordinating with Iraqi commanders. Not just arms deals. Betrayal, treason. Someone on the American side had been selling weapons to Saddam Hussein's forces, even as U.S. troops were dying in the desert. Someone had sold out their own people. Lieutenant, Garrett's voice was barely a whisper through her earpiece. We've got movement. 1 click north. Multiple vehicles. Her hands moved faster, photographing everything, trying to capture proof that would stand up in court, that would force someone to listen, that would save those 7 men before it was too late. The first explosion hit the compound's western wall. The concussion wave threw Cass against the desk, scattering papers, her camera skidding across the floor. Her ears rang. Smoke and dust filled the room, choking, blinding. Through the haze, she heard gunfire. Close. Getting closer. Ambush! Someone screamed through the radio. They knew we were coming. Impossible. The mission was classified. Top secret. Only a handful of people knew the target, the timing, the approach vector. Only people who could be trusted. Except someone couldn't be. Hands grabbed her tactical vest, hauling her to her feet. Garrett. Blood ran down the side of his face from a cut above his eye, but his grip was iron. Move now. They ran. Behind them, the compound erupted in flames as someone hit the generator with an RPG. The documents, the evidence, everything she'd photographed still in that room. Still on that desk, burning. The extraction route had been compromised. Iraqi forces poured in from positions they shouldn't have known to occupy. It wasn't random. It wasn't luck. Someone had told them exactly where the SEALs would be. They made it 200 meters before the bullet found Garrett. He went down hard, his leg buckling, blood dark against the sand. Cass didn't think. She hooked her arms under his shoulders and dragged her boots, slipping, her lungs burning, every muscle screaming. Behind them, muzzle flashes lit the night like deadly fireflies. Leave me, Garrett gasped. Get to the LZ. Shut up, Chief. A SEAL appeared beside her, then another. They formed a defensive perimeter as she pulled Garrett toward the rally point, each step an eternity, each breath a prayer that the next bullet wouldn't find her spine. The helicopter came in low and fast, door gunners laying suppressive fire that tore the night apart. Strong hands pulled them aboard. The bird lifted, banking hard, and Cass caught one last glimpse of the burning compound below. All that evidence, all that proof. Gone. In the red glow of the helicopter's interior lights, Garrett's face was pale with blood loss. A medic worked on his leg hands, moving with practiced efficiency, but Garrett's eyes found hers. "Someone sold us out," he said, his voice barely audible over the rotors. "Someone American." Cass nodded. She'd been thinking the same thing. The timing was too perfect. The Iraqi response too coordinated. Whoever had leaked their mission had wanted those documents destroyed, had wanted the truth about those 7 POWs to stay buried. "I'll find them," she said, her voice steady even as her hands shook with adrenaline. "I swear to God I'll find them." Garrett's hand found hers, his grip weak but deliberate. "We'll find them. Together." The helicopter carried them into darkness, leaving the burning truth behind in the sand. Norfolk Naval Station, present day. The Pentagon conference room was all steel and glass, and the kind of lighting that made everyone look tired. Rear Admiral Cassandra Thorne stood at the window, watching jets take off from Reagan National in the distance, and felt the weight of 33 years pressing down on her shoulders. At 57, she kept herself in fighting shape through discipline that bordered on obsession. Morning runs, evening waits, a diet that her friends jokingly called punishment. But the gray had crept into her auburn hair anyway, and the scar at her temple, a memento from Fallujah in '04, had turned silver with age. Some things couldn't be outrun. "Admiral Thorne," she turned. Vice Admiral James Warren stood in the doorway, his face carrying the particular expression that meant the news was bad and about to get worse. They'd served together for 2 decades. She could read him like a weather map. "Sir." He closed the door. That was never good. "Norfolk Naval Station has a problem," Warren said, moving to the conference table and spreading out 3 folders. "Third base in 6 months to show systematic security failures. But this one's different." Cass moved to the table, scanning the documents. Incident reports, inventory discrepancies, security footage gaps. Her trained eye caught the pattern immediately. "Not technological failures," she said. "Human." "Exactly." Warren pulled up satellite imagery on the wall screen. "Norfolk is bleeding weapons, M4 rifles, M9 pistols, grenades, C4. Small amounts over 18 months, but it adds up. 47 rifles gone, 23 sidearms, enough explosive to level a building. Inside job. Has to be. The pattern suggests multiple officers working in coordination. They know the inventory cycles, the inspection schedules, the camera coverage. Whoever's running this operation has access and authority." Cass studied the screen, her mind already working through possibilities vectors of approach ways to crack a conspiracy that had clearly been years in the making. This was what she did, what she'd been doing since Kuwait, finding the rot, cutting it out. "You want Ghost Protocol," she said. Warren nodded. "Level 5. Need to know only. Even the base commander won't be informed until you're ready to reveal yourself." Ghost Protocol, the assessment program that Cass had developed after 9/11, refined through 2 decades of rooting out corruption, complacency, and outright criminality from military installations across the globe. The concept was simple. Send in an admiral disguised as someone powerless, homeless usually, and see how the personnel treated them when they thought no one important was watching. You learned everything you needed to know about an organization by how it treated people who couldn't fight back. "When do I leave?" Cass asked. Warren hesitated. That was unusual. The man had sent her into active war zones without blinking. "There's something else," he said quietly. "Captain Mitchell Reeves went missing from Norfolk 6 days ago." The name hit like a fist to the chest. Mitchell, her protege, the young intelligence officer she'd personally recruited and mentored for the past 8 years. Sharp, dedicated, the kind of officer who actually gave a damn about doing the right thing. Missing how? Officially AWOL. But his last known location was the Norfolk Armory at midnight, investigating these same weapons discrepancies. Warren pulled up a final document. "He sent you an email 40 minutes before he disappeared. It was intercepted by our security filters because of the content. I only saw it this morning." He handed her a printed copy. Mitchell's words truncated desperate Admiral Thorne. "Found the connection. It's not just Norfolk. It goes back, way back, to '91. The POWs, the betrayal. They're still operating. Still active. Meeting you at the message ended there. Cass read it 3 times, each word confirming what she'd suspected for 33 years, but could never prove. The conspiracy that had burned in the Kuwaiti desert hadn't died. It had just gone underground, metastasized, evolved. Who else has seen this? Her voice was steady, professional, revealing nothing of the fury building behind her ribs. Just you and me, and whoever intercepted it on the other end. So they know Mitchell made the connection. They know he was trying to reach me. She looked up. They took him to find out what he'd already told us, and to stop him from telling anyone else. Warren's silence was confirmation enough. Cass moved back to the window, watching the jets, thinking. Mitchell was smart, careful. If he'd found proof about 91, he would have hidden backups, left trails. But he was also 40 and had never faced the kind of people who'd been running criminal enterprises for 3 decades. People who'd proven they were willing to kill to protect their secrets. People who'd left 7 American POWs to die in Syrian prisons, rather than risk exposure. Norfolk has a senior master chief, Cass said. Garrett Sullivan. I know. Warren's voice carried understanding. He doesn't know you're coming. I thought about warning him, but if there's a mole at the senior level, we can't risk it. She turned. Even Garrett. You trust him? Did she? They'd served together once 33 years ago for 3 months in Kuwait. He'd taken a bullet that had been meant for her back. They'd made promises to each other about finding the truth about honoring the fallen. Then their careers had diverged, their paths crossed only occasionally at ceremonies and conferences. Friendly, professional, distant. She trusted the man she'd known in 1991. But people changed. 33 years was long enough for anyone to be corrupted, compromised, or simply worn down by the weight of staying silent. I trust him enough to test him, Cass said, which is more than I can say for anyone else at Norfolk. Warren studied her face. You think you'll find Mitchell alive? I think whoever took him is trying to figure out how much damage he's done. That takes time. And while they're distracted with him, she pulled the folders toward her. I'll be dismantling their entire operation from the inside. Cass, Warren's voice softened in the way it only did when they were speaking as friends, not officers. Ghost protocol works because you're willing to endure humiliation, abuse, sometimes physical assault to get the truth. But these people killed to protect their secrets once. They'll do it again. Then I'll have to be very good at not dying. She said it lightly, but they both knew the risk. If the conspiracy was as old and deep as Mitchell's email suggested, the people running it would be experienced, paranoid, and absolutely ruthless. They'd already demonstrated their willingness to betray their own country for profit. One more body wouldn't slow them down, but neither would the thought of danger stop her. Cass had made a promise in a burning Kuwaiti compound 33 years ago, to 7 men she'd never met, to a young master chief who'd bled in the sand so she could escape, to herself. She'd find the truth, or die trying. Warren handed her a final folder. Your covered documentation. Transport leaves in 4 hours. Master Chief Sullivan runs the main checkpoint at Norfolk. If the rot's reached him, you'll know within an hour of arrival. And if it hasn't, then maybe you've got one ally you didn't know you had. Cass tucked the folder under her arm and headed for the door. Admiral, Warren's voice stopped her. Those 7 POWs from 91. We never found them. Never even confirmed they existed outside of rumors and unverified intelligence. If Mitchell really found proof, then we're going to make sure their families finally get answers. She met his eyes. All of them. No matter who it burns. She left him standing in the conference room surrounded by evidence of betrayal and went to become a ghost. The transformation took 2 hours in a Pentagon bathroom that had seen stranger things, but not by much. Cass stripped away everything that marked her as military. The posture first, she let her shoulders hunch, her spine curve, the train bearing that had been drilled into her at Annapolis dissolving into the defeated slouch of someone who'd stopped fighting years ago. The clothes came from a Goodwill in Southeast D.C., jeans worn through at the knees, the fraying organic rather than fashionable, a gray t-shirt that had once advertised a 5K fun run, now so faded the text was illegible, and the denim jacket critical to the disguise bought 3 sizes too large and artificially aged with sandpaper and bleach until it looked like it had survived a decade on the streets. She hadn't showered in 2 days. Preparation. Her hair, normally pulled back in a regulation bun, hung loose and unwashed around her face. She worked in dirt from a planter, real grime under her fingernails, the kind that said, this wasn't temporary poverty, but chronic. Makeup went on last, or rather the absence of it carefully constructed. Dark circles under her eyes from eyeshadow applied in reverse. A hollowness to her cheeks from strategic contouring. The scar at her temple she left visible, there was no explaining that away, and anyway, homeless veterans existed. Let them wonder. The mirror showed her a woman who'd been used up and thrown away. 57 and carrying every one of those years like stones in her pockets. Invisible. Powerless. Beneath notice. Perfect. She had one piece of herself left. The challenge coin, worn smooth by 3 decades of nervous handling, hung from a thin silver chain around her neck. SEAL Team 7 had given them out after the Kuwait mission, only 7 minted one for each member of the assault team, and one for the intelligence officer who'd nearly died trying to photograph evidence that had burned before anyone could see it. The coin was brass, small enough to hide under her shirt. On one side, the SEAL trident. On the other, barely legible after years of wear, the inscription DevGru, Team 7, Operation Desert Storm, Feb 1991. She tucked it under her shirt where it rested cool against her sternum. A talisman, a reminder, a promise 3 decades overdue. The Pentagon guard at the side exit didn't recognize her. That was the point. He saw a homeless woman who'd somehow gotten into the building and moved to intercept, one hand on his sidearm, the other reaching for his radio. Ma'am, you can't be here. I'm going to need you to come with me. Cass looked at him with empty eyes. Didn't speak. Didn't argue. Just stood there like someone who'd stopped expecting anything good to happen and was waiting for the next bad thing. The guard's expression shifted from alert to uncomfortable. He was young, maybe 25, and clearly hadn't been trained for this scenario. His hand left his weapon. Look, there's a shelter 2 blocks from here. I can call someone. She's with me. The voice came from behind them. Admiral Warren, still in uniform, his rank doing what Cass's silence couldn't. Special consultant, I'll escort her out. The guard's confusion was visible, but he didn't argue with a 3-star admiral. He stepped aside and Warren walked Cass through the exit into the humid DC afternoon. You look like hell, Warren said conversationally. That's the idea, sir. A nondescript sedan waited at the curb windows, tinted government plates. The driver was agency CIA, probably, though Warren didn't introduce her, and Cass didn't ask. Some things were better not known. The drive to Norfolk took 4 hours through traffic that ranged from heavy to apocalyptic. Cass sat in the back watching the landscape change from urban to suburban to rural, and back again, her mind running through the operation parameters. She had no backup, no wire, no weapon. Ghost protocol worked because she was genuinely vulnerable, genuinely at risk. The moment she had resources to fall back on, the test became artificial. Personnel treated her differently if they thought she had power. She needed them to reveal who they really were when they thought no one important was watching. The driver dropped her 4 blocks from Norfolk's main gate. No words, no acknowledgement. The car pulled away and Cass was alone on a street corner in Portsmouth, Virginia, looking every inch like someone with nowhere to go, and no one waiting for them. It was 8:35 in the morning. The day was already hot. She started walking. Norfolk Naval Station sprawled across thousands of acres, home to the Atlantic Fleet, dozens of ships, and over 60,000 personnel on any given day. The largest naval base in the world. A city unto itself with all the complexity and corruption that implied. And somewhere inside those gates, Mitchell Reeves was either alive or dead, and the truth about 7 POWs from 1991 was either waiting to be found or buried so deep it would never surface. Cass adjusted her jacket and kept walking. The main gate checkpoint appeared gradually through the morning heat shimmer. Chain-link fencing topped with concertina wire. Guard booths, vehicle barriers designed to stop a truck bomb. Security cameras on poles, their black domes watching everything, recording. Everything, seeing nothing that mattered. 3 guards were visible. 2 men, 1 woman. The woman was taking photos of something with her personal phone, laughing. The younger man looked nervous new. The older one, the sergeant based on his stripes, stood with his arms crossed and an expression that said he was done with his shift before it had even started. Cass approached the pedestrian entrance and stopped. just stopped, didn't speak, didn't gesture, didn't make demands or explanations. She simply stood there 5 feet from the barrier and waited. It took 40 seconds for the sergeant to notice her. "Hey!" His voice carried across the checkpoint, sharp with irritation. "You can't be here. This is federal property." Cass didn't respond, didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the middle distance, on nothing, with the practiced blankness of someone who'd learned that eye contact invited trouble. The sergeant's irritation upgraded to annoyance. He strode over a big man, easily 6'3" and 240, moving with the kind of aggressive confidence that came from never being challenged. His name tape read, "Briggs." "Ma'am." He made the word sound like an insult. "You need to leave. Now." Silence. "Are you hearing me?" Briggs stepped closer, invading her personal space in a way that was calculated to intimidate. "This is a restricted military installation. You are trespassing on federal property. That's a felony. Do you understand?" Cass let her eyes focus on him. Just for a moment. Just long enough to see who he really was. He stared back, and what she saw confirmed everything the incident reports had suggested. This was a man who enjoyed his power, who liked the feeling of being bigger, stronger, more important than the people he was supposed to serve. His hand rested on his belt near his sidearm, a casual threat that probably wasn't even conscious anymore. How many times had he done this? How many people had he intimidated, belittled, abused, because he could Marcus? The younger guard approached, hovering at the edge of the confrontation. His name tape read, "Hudson." "Maybe we should call—" "I don't need you to think Hudson. I need you to do your job." Briggs didn't take his eyes off Cass. "Which means backing me up when some vagrant decides to squat at our front gate." "She's not squatting, she's just standing." "Are you arguing with me, Private?" Hudson went quiet. The fear in his eyes was real and recent. This was a kid, 21, maybe fresh out of training, who'd learned quickly that questioning Sergeant Briggs was hazardous to your career. The female guard joined them, her phone still in her hand. Specialist Torres, according to her uniform. She looked at Cass with a mixture of amusement and contempt. "Probably homeless," Torres said. "Portsmouth's full of them. They wander over here looking for handouts." "Well, she's not getting any." Briggs grabbed Cass's arm, not gently. His fingers dug in hard enough to leave bruises, and he pulled her toward the checkpoint with enough force to make her stumble. "Come on, we're going to process you, and then you're going to spend the night in a cell learning why you don't come to federal installations looking for charity." Cass let herself be pulled. Compliant, submissive, exactly what he expected. Torres laughed and raised her phone, taking a photo. "Oh, this is going on Instagram. Bet it gets at least 1,000 likes." They dragged Cass past the vehicle barriers into the checkpoint proper. Security cameras watched from 3 angles. A 4th camera that should have been recording had a dark lens offline. Cass noted it without changing her expression. Someone had disabled that camera. Recently, deliberately. The checkpoint building was standard military architecture, concrete steel designed more for function than comfort. They pulled her into a processing room with a metal table, 2 chairs, and walls painted that particular shade of institutional beige that made everything feel slightly hopeless. Briggs shoved her into a chair. "Empty your pockets." Cass slowly reached into her jacket pocket. The movement made the chain around her neck shift, and Torres noticed. "What's that?" Torres reached out and yanked the chain, pulling it and the coin out from under Cass's shirt. "Some kind of necklace." She held the coin up to the light, squinting at the worn inscription. Briggs leaned in to look. "It's just an old coin," Torres said dismissively. "Probably found it in a gutter somewhere." But Briggs was studying it more carefully now, his expression shifting from contempt to uncertainty. He might not recognize what it was, but he recognized that it was something. Military, old, potentially important. "Where did you get this?" His voice had lost some of its aggressive edge. Cass said nothing. "I asked you a question." The door opened. A new figure entered, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 5 degrees. Master Chief Garrett Sullivan was 65 and looked like he'd spent every one of those years preparing for war. His face showed the marks of 4 decades in service time, worn creased with lines that spoke of deployments, losses, and the impossible weight of trying to do right in an imperfect world. His hair had gone silver gray, cut military short, and his right leg carried a slight hitch-old injury from Kuwait, never quite healed right. But his eyes were sharp, alert, missing nothing. He looked at Briggs holding the chain, at Torres with her phone, at Hudson hovering nervously by the door, and finally at Cass slumped in the chair, silent and still. For just a moment, less than a second, their eyes met. Garrett's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his gaze. Recognition, surprise, Cass couldn't be sure. Master Chief. Briggs straightened slightly, though he didn't release his grip on the chain. Unidentified female, no ID, refusing to speak. Found her at the front gate. We're processing her for trespass. Garrett moved closer, his limp more pronounced than Cass remembered. The Kuwaiti bullet had done permanent damage. He reached out and Briggs handed over the chain without argument. The coin lay in Garrett's calloused hand, and he turned it slowly, examining both sides. His thumb traced the worn trident. The faded inscription? SEAL Team 7. Cass watched his face, watched the moment comprehension arrived. Watched him remember a night in Kuwait 33 years ago when a young intelligence officer had dragged his bleeding body through the sand while Iraqi bullets tore the air around them. Watched him realize exactly who was sitting in this chair. Garrett's jaw tightened, just for a moment. Then he schooled his expression back to neutral professional, revealing nothing. It's an old military coin, he said, his voice giving nothing away. Special operations, but not current issue. He handed it back to Briggs. Proceed with your protocol, Sergeant. Document everything. If she won't speak, we'll run her prints and figure out who she is. He turned to leave. Master Chief. Briggs's voice stopped him. Should we call the MPs? Garrett paused at the door, looked back at Cass one more time, and this time, just for an instant, she saw it. The understanding, the calculation, the decision to play along. Not yet, he said. Let's see who she is first. Could be she's got a reason for being here that we don't know about. He left without another word. Briggs looked down at Cass with renewed suspicion. What's your name? She didn't answer. Fine. Torres, pat her down. Full search. Hudson, go get the print scanner. We'll ID her the hard way. Torres moved forward, latex gloves snapping against her wrists, and Cass prepared herself for what came next. This was the test. This was why Ghost Protocol worked. In the next 30 minutes, these three guards would reveal exactly who they were when they thought no one important was watching. They'd show her their real faces, their real values, their real character. And she would remember everything. The latex gloves made a sharp snap as Torres pulled them tight. She circled Cass like a predator, evaluating prey, her phone now tucked into her pocket but still accessible. The urge to document, to turn human suffering into content, was stronger than protocol. Arms out, Torres commanded. Cass complied slowly, her movements deliberate. She'd endured worse than this in actual combat zones and interrogation resistance training, in places where the people searching her actually wanted her dead. But this was different. This was American soil, American personnel, people who'd sworn oaths to protect and defend. People who were about to prove those oaths meant nothing. Torres's hands were rough, deliberately so. She patted down Cass's sides with more force than necessary, checking pockets that were obviously empty, lingering in places that had nothing to do with security and everything to do with humiliation. This wasn't a search. It was a violation dressed up as procedure. Nothing in the jacket, Torres announced. Jeans pockets empty, no wallet, no ID, no phone, nothing. Check under her shirt, Briggs said from his position by the door. That requires a private room, Sarge. Protocol says, I know what protocol says. I'm telling you to check now. Torres hesitated, but only for a moment. Rank 1. Her hands moved to the hem of Cass's gray t-shirt. This was the line. The moment that separated inconvenience from actual assault. Cass had given them every opportunity to step back, to follow proper procedure, to remember that the person in front of them was human. They were choosing to cross anyway. She filed it away. Evidence, testimony, career-ending documentation. Torres lifted the shirt just enough to check the waistband, and the movement shifted the coin's chain. It caught the fluorescent light, drawing Briggs's attention again. The necklace too, he said. Take it off her. Torres reached for the clasp. Cass's hands came up instinctively, a protective gesture that was pure reflex. Torres slapped them away. Don't, Torres said sharply. You don't get to touch me. She unclasped the chain and held it up the coin, spinning slowly. For a moment it caught the light just right, and the inscription became visible. Clear. Undeniable. Torres squinted at it. What's Devgru? Briggs moved closer, taking the chain from her. He studied the coin with more attention, now his brow furrowed. He was military. 12 years in security positions. He should recognize what he was holding. But recognition required curiosity. And Briggs had spent 12 years not being curious about the people he processed. They were problems to be solved, threats to be neutralized, statistics to be documented. Their stories didn't matter because they didn't matter. Probably something she picked up at a pawn shop, Briggs said, finally tossing the chain onto the metal table, where it landed with a faint clink. Homeless people collect all kinds of junk. Hudson had returned with the fingerprint scanner, a portable device that would ping national databases and return results in under a minute. He set it on the table, his hands unsteady. Sarge, Hudson said quietly, maybe you should do what I told you and scan her prints. Briggs's voice carried warning. Unless you want to spend the rest of your shift on parking lot patrol. Hudson swallowed hard and picked up the scanner. He moved toward Cass, and his discomfort was palpable. Whatever training had brought him to this checkpoint hadn't included a class on how to dehumanize people efficiently. He was learning on the job. Ma'am, Hudson said, and he actually meant it as a term of respect. I need to scan your right hand, your fingers. It won't hurt. Cass extended her hand. Palm down. Steady. No tremor despite the adrenaline singing through her veins. Hudson pressed her fingers against the scanner one at a time. Thumb, index, middle. The device beeped with each successful capture. Ring, pinky, done. He stepped back, and the scanner's screen flickered as it processed the prints, searching through databases that contained every military member, every federal employee, every person who'd ever been printed for a security clearance, searching for Rear Admiral Cassandra Thorne. But it wouldn't find her. Not immediately. Ghost protocol included digital countermeasures, her prints temporarily flagged in the system, with a 48-hour delay on results. Long enough for the assessment, short enough to maintain security. The scanner would show no match found, which meant as far as these three guards were concerned, Cass was nobody. A ghost in truth as well as name. The device beeped. Hudson looked at the screen and frowned. Nothing, he said. No criminal record, no military service, no federal employment. She's not in the system at all. Briggs grabbed the scanner and checked for himself, as if Hudson might have somehow read it wrong. His expression darkened. That's impossible. Everyone's in the system. Even illegals get printed when they're arrested. Maybe she's never been arrested, Hudson suggested. Or maybe she's smart enough to avoid getting caught. Briggs set the scanner down hard. Torres, keep trying that phone trick. Get her face. We'll run facial recognition. Torres pulled out her personal phone again and aimed it at Cass, who kept her head down, hair falling across her face. The angle was bad, the lighting worse. Any facial recognition software would struggle with the image quality. But Torres took the photo anyway, already composing the caption in her head. Already imagining the likes, the comments, the validation that came from turning someone else's degradation into entertainment. Got it, Torres said, her thumb moving across the screen. Uploading now. The door opened again, and this time a woman in officer's uniform entered. Commander Margaret Winters, according to her name tape. 15 years of service, 3 deployments, and a record that showed steady progression through the ranks. A woman who'd worked hard to get where she was, who'd probably faced discrimination, harassment, the 1,000 small cuts that came with being female in a male-dominated profession. Who should have known better? Winters took in the scene with a single glance. Briggs standing aggressive and territorial, Torres with her phone out, Hudson hovering at the periphery, looking uncomfortable, and Cass sitting silent in the chair, her shirt disheveled from the search, her necklace confiscated, her dignity stripped away layer by layer. Report, Winters said. Unidentified female commander, Briggs said, coming to attention. No ID, no cooperation, no hits in the database. Found her at the main gate. We're processing for trespassing. Winters looked at Cass, really looked. Her eyes took in the worn clothes, the unwashed hair, the posture of defeat. and something in her expression shifted, not to sympathy, to dismissal. Cass saw the calculation happen in real time. Winters had a briefing in 20 minutes. This was not a problem that required a commander's attention. This was exactly the kind of situation she had enlisted personnel to handle. "How long have you been processing her?" Winters asked. 15 minutes, ma'am. "And you haven't gotten a single word out of her?" "No, ma'am. She's refusing to speak." Winters checked her watch. The gesture was small but telling. Time was being wasted. Important time. Her time. "Then speed this up, Sergeant. I don't care how you do it. Strip search if you have to. Document everything. Either charge her or release her, but do it quickly. I have actual security concerns that need my attention." She turned to leave and Cass spoke for the first time since entering the checkpoint. "Inspection room," she said quietly. "Not here." Her voice was flat, emotionless. The tone of someone who'd learned that displays of feeling only made things worse. But underneath it, steel. Command. The unconscious authority of someone used to being obeyed. Winters stopped, turned back. Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me. If you're going to strip search me," Cass said, still not making eye contact, "protocol requires a private room, two-way mirror, camera recording, witness present who's not participating in the search. Not here. Not in a processing room with 3 guards and no oversight." The silence that followed was profound. Briggs's face went red. Torres's smirk disappeared. Hudson looked like he wanted to sink through the floor, and Winters stood absolutely still, her expression cycling through surprise, confusion, and finally anger. Because Cass was right. Everything she'd said was correct procedure, and the fact that a homeless vagrant knew the exact regulations meant something that none of them wanted to think about too carefully. "How do you know that?" Winters asked slowly. Cass didn't answer. She'd given them enough. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Let the doubt creep in that maybe this wasn't what it appeared to be. Winters' jaw tightened. "Sergeant Briggs, take her to inspection room 3. Follow proper protocol, and someone get me a legal officer to observe. I want everything documented." "Ma'am, is that really—" "That's an order, Sergeant." Winters left without another word, but her anger filled the room even after she was gone. She'd been put on the spot by a homeless woman who somehow knew military regulations better than she did. That was the kind of humiliation that didn't fade quickly. Briggs grabbed Cass's arm again, his grip bruising. "Get up, now!" They walked her down a corridor that smelled of industrial cleaner and old coffee. Past offices where personnel looked up briefly, then looked away, not wanting to get involved. Past a break room where someone was microwaving something that had died months ago. Past a bathroom where water dripped from a faucet in steady rhythm. Inspection room 3 was smaller than the processing room, maybe 10 by 12 feet. Concrete walls painted government gray, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, and a two-way mirror that dominated one wall. Behind that mirror, in theory, observers could watch to ensure nothing improper happened during searches. In practice, the observation room was usually empty unless someone important was being processed. Cass noted the camera in the corner. Its red recording light was off. The camera was supposed to be recording always. That was the entire point. Independent documentation. Someone had turned it off. Recently. Deliberately. Just like the camera at the front gate. "Sit," Briggs commanded, pointing at the chair. Cass sat. Briggs positioned himself between her and the door, making it clear that leaving wasn't an option. Torres leaned against the wall, her phone now openly in her hand, recording or preparing to record. Hudson stood by the door, looking progressively more miserable. They waited. Minutes ticked by. Cass used the time to memorize every detail. The dimensions, the sight lines, the distance to the door. The way the table was bolted down but the chairs weren't. The scuff marks on the floor that suggested furniture had been thrown before. This room had seen violence. Recent violence. At the edge of her peripheral vision, through the two-way mirror's subtle distortion, she caught movement in the observation room. Someone was there. Watching. The door opened and Master Chief Garrett Sullivan entered. No legal officer, no witness, just him and the weight of 33 years of unfinished business. He looked at Cass. She looked back. And in that moment, an entire conversation happened in silence. Garrett's eyes asked, "Are you sure about this?" Cass's eyes answered, "I've never been more sure of anything." Garrett nodded slightly. He moved to the side of the room, positioning himself where he could see everything. Protective instinct, even if he couldn't intervene. Not yet. Not while she was still testing them. "Proceed with your search, Sergeant," Garrett said quietly. But his voice carried weight, authority. The kind that came from 4 decades of knowing when something was deeply wrong. Briggs hesitated. Having the Master Chief present changed the dynamic. Added risk. But Winters had given orders, and disobeying a commander to avoid the discomfort of being watched would look worse than proceeding. "Stand up," Briggs said to Cass. "Arms out to the sides." She complied. Torres moved forward, gloves on again. This time the search was more invasive, more deliberate, teaching this vagrant a lesson about knowing her place, about embarrassing them with her knowledge of regulations, about being something other than what she appeared. Cass endured. Her face showed nothing. She'd been trained for this, had experienced worse in resistance courses where instructors actively tried to break her. Torres was an amateur by comparison, but Hudson wasn't. He stood by the door watching, and his face showed everything. Horror, shame, the dawning realization that he was complicit in something wrong, something that violated every value he'd thought the military stood for. Torres reached for the coin's chain where it lay on Cass's collarbone. "This thing again," Torres muttered, lifting it. "Master Chief, what exactly is DevGru?" Garrett's expression didn't change, but Cass caught the way his hand tightened on his belt, the slight straightening of his spine, the shift from observer to something more engaged. "It's Naval Special Warfare Development Group," Garrett said carefully. "SEAL teams. The coin you're holding is from a classified operation. They don't make those for the general public." "So she stole it," Torres said. "Maybe, or maybe it was given to her." Garrett moved closer, his limp pronounced. "Those coins carry weight. They're not jewelry. They're promises, reminders of moments that mattered." He held out his hand. Torres placed the coin in it. Garrett turned it slowly in the light. His thumb traced the inscription, and Cass saw the exact moment he read the date. February 1991. Operation Desert Storm. Saw him remember. "Sergeant Briggs," Garrett said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm going to recommend we stop this process immediately." Master Chief Commander Winters ordered. "I don't care what Commander Winters ordered. This woman is carrying a SEAL Team 7 challenge coin from an operation that happened 33 years ago, an operation so classified that most of the details are still redacted. And she's demonstrating operational security knowledge that suggests prior service or current access." Briggs was beginning to understand that he'd made a mistake, a serious one. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to verify her identity through channels that don't show up in standard databases. I'm saying that there are protocols for hiding flag officers when they conduct security assessments. And I'm saying that if this woman is who I think she might be, everyone in this room just committed career suicide." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Torres's phone slipped from her fingers. Hudson made a sound like a wounded animal. Briggs stood frozen, his brain struggling to process what Garrett was implying. "I need to make a call," Briggs said finally, his voice shaking. "Torres, Hudson, stay with her. Master Chief, if you could—" The door burst open. Commander Stevens, the base commanding officer, entered at speed. His face was gray. His hands trembled. Behind him, 2 military police officers took position. "Everyone out," Stevens said, his voice barely controlled. "Except her. Master Chief Sullivan, you stay." Briggs tried to protest. Stevens' glare silenced him. The 3 guards were ushered into the corridor. The door closed. Stevens and Garrett stood on opposite sides of the room. Cass sat between them, still silent, still waiting for the moment. "Master Chief," Stevens said quietly, "do you know who this is?" "I have a suspicion, sir." "Tell me I'm wrong." "I don't think you are, sir." Stevens closed his eyes, took a breath. When he opened them, he picked up the coin from where Garrett had placed it on the table. Read the inscription. Let the implications sink in. "Ma'am," Stevens said, his voice rough, "I need you to identify yourself." Cass reached slowly for the torn shirt, pulling it aside to reveal her left shoulder fully. The skin was pale, marked with old scars. But above the scars inked in black that had faded with age but remained unmistakably clear was a tattoo. An eagle clutching a trident in one talon and a pistol in the other, an anchor beneath, and below that words that made Commander Stevens' knees buckle. DevGru, SEAL Team 7 Operation Desert Storm, Feb 1991. The room went completely still. Garrett moved first, stepping forward and coming to attention. His hands snapped up in a salute so crisp it cut the air. Tears ran down his face, but his voice was steady. "Admiral on deck," he said. Stevens managed to salute, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the gesture. "Rear Admiral Cassandra Thorne," he said hoarsely. "Ma'am, we weren't informed. If I had known—" Cass stood slowly. She looked at Garrett first, holding his eyes. Then she turned to Stevens, and when she spoke, her voice had changed. This was command voice. Authority absolute. That commander was entirely the point. Cass pulled her shirt back into place, covering the tattoo that had just destroyed multiple careers. Her fingers found the challenge coin on the table, picking it up and returning it to the chain that Torres had so carelessly dismissed as junk. "I am conducting a ghost protocol assessment of Norfolk Naval Station," Cass said, fastening the chain around her neck. The coin settled against her sternum exactly where it belonged. "Under authority granted by the Secretary of the Navy, Level 5 classification. Need to know only." "Ma'am, Stevens began. "I have been on your base for 37 minutes, Commander. In that time, I was verbally abused by your checkpoint sergeant, photographed without consent by your security specialist for personal social media use, subjected to an improper search in a processing room with no witness or recording, dragged to an inspection room where the security camera has been deliberately disabled, and ordered to undergo a strip search by a commander who didn't bother to verify who I was before issuing that order." Each sentence landed like a physical blow. Stevens' face went from gray to ashen. "Furthermore," Cass continued, her voice cold and precise, "I have identified multiple deliberate security failures. Camera 7 at the front gate has been offline for 6 hours. The motion sensor at door 3 has a 3.2-second delay between activation and alert. Ventilation access point C has no security grading, despite maintenance requests filed 8 months ago. Someone has been systematically sabotaging your security infrastructure, and your personnel are either complicit or too incompetent to notice. Ma'am, I can explain. Can you explain why Captain Mitchell Reeves, who was investigating weapons discrepancies at this base, disappeared 6 days ago, and you reported him as AWOL instead of missing under suspicious circumstances?" Stevens's mouth opened, closed. No words came out. "Can you explain why 47 M4 rifles, 23 M9 pistols, and enough C4 to level a building have gone missing from your armory over the past 18 months? We're investigating those discrepancies." "You're investigating nothing. You're papering over a criminal conspiracy that has been operating at your base for years, possibly decades, and you're either too blind to see it or too compromised to stop it." Cass moved toward the door. Both men stepped aside instinctively. She was smaller than both of them, older, unarmed, and dressed like someone who'd been sleeping in alleys. But the authority in her presence made them move as if she commanded legions. She stopped at the door and looked back. "I want personnel files for everyone involved in this incident on my desk within the hour. I want full security logs for the past 6 months. I want armory access records, maintenance requests, and incident reports. And I want them unmodified, Commander. I will know if you've tried to sanitize anything." "Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Master Chief Sullivan will accompany me. He's being temporarily assigned to my assessment team as of this moment." Garrett straightened. "Ma'am. And Commander, if word of this spreads beyond the personnel directly involved before I'm ready to make my assessment public, I will hold you personally responsible. Is that understood?" "Yes, Admiral. Understood." Cass opened the door. Outside, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread through the checkpoint like wildfire. 20, maybe 30 personnel, all staring, all trying to understand what had just happened. She walked through them without speaking, and they parted like water. Garrett followed his hand, resting unconsciously near her elbow, in a protective gesture that dated back 33 years to a night when he'd bled in the sand, and she'd refused to leave him behind. They made it 50 feet before a voice stopped them. Admiral Thorne. Cass turned. An elderly man in a wheelchair had rolled forward from the crowd. Colonel Benjamin Sterling, according to the veteran cap he wore. 78 if he was a day. Korean War Service ribbon on his jacket. His eyes were sharp despite his age, and they held the particular clarity that came from seeing combat young and carrying its lessons forever. "Sir," Cass said, her voice gentling slightly. "I knew," Sterling said simply. "The moment I saw you. Combat bearing, awareness, discipline. I tried to warn them." "Did they listen?" "No, ma'am. They saw what they expected to see, not what was actually there." He paused. "That's the problem with most people. They think seeing and observing are the same thing." Sterling reached into his jacket and pulled out a small notebook, well-worn, filled with cramped handwriting in multiple colors of ink. "I've been coming here weekly to visit a friend in the hospital wing," he said. "For 3 months I've been documenting irregularities, strange patterns, things that didn't add up." He held out the notebook. "I think you're going to want to see this, ma'am." Cass took it, flipping through pages of observations, dates, times, vehicle movements at odd hours, personnel seen in restricted areas without proper escort, equipment transfers that violated protocol, a meticulous record compiled by a veteran who'd spent 5 decades learning to recognize when something was wrong. One entry caught her eye: Feb 14 or 2:30 OHRs, white panel van contractor plates entering South Gate. No scheduled deliveries. Proceeded to Warehouse 7. Departed 0447 HR's driver, plus 1 passenger visible on exit. No cargo visible, but vehicle rode lower. Weight added. 3 days before Mitchell disappeared. "Colonel Sterling," Cass said quietly, "this is exceptional intelligence work. Thank you." "Just doing my duty, ma'am. Same as you." He paused. "And ma'am, whatever you're really here for, whatever you're hunting, I hope you find it." She tucked the notebook into her jacket pocket. "So do I, Colonel. So do I." They continued to Commander Stevens' office building. Garrett beside her, their footsteps echoing on concrete. Neither spoke until they were inside, away from the crowd in a conference room that Stevens had hastily cleared. Only then did Garrett finally speak. "Cass," he said softly, using her first name for the first time in the 33 years. "It really is you." She turned to face him fully. 33 years since Kuwait. 33 years of promises made and not yet kept. He'd aged, they both had, but his eyes still held that same steady competence that had made her trust him when she was 24 and bleeding and terrified. "Hello, Garrett. I never stopped looking," he said, "for proof about what happened in 91, for evidence about the POWs, for anything that would let us finish what we started. Neither did I. And Mitchell Reeves found something, got too close. They took him." Cass's jaw tightened. "But we're going to get him back, and this time we're going to finish it. All of it." Garrett nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "The truth. Is the corruption contained to the checkpoint, or has it reached the senior enlisted ranks?" "Not me," Garrett said immediately. "But I can't speak for everyone. I've been Master Chief here for 3 years. I've noticed things. Small things. But I didn't have authority to investigate, and when I raised concerns, they were dismissed as an old man being paranoid." "What kind of things?" "Inventory discrepancies that disappear from reports. Maintenance requests that get approved, then vanish from the system. Personnel transfers that don't make sense. And," he hesitated, "3 officers who are always on duty when things go wrong. Always. Names: Lieutenant Harrison Blackwell, Intelligence; Commander Richard Novak; Supply, Captain Sarah Devereaux; Security Chief." Garrett pulled out his phone and brought up photos. "I've been documenting their movements for 6 months. Call it paranoia or instinct, but something about them felt wrong." Cass studied the faces. Blackwell looked like middle management personified, soft around the middle, receding hairline, the kind of man who blended into any office environment. Novak was older, heavy-set, with the resigned expression of someone counting days until retirement. Devereaux was harder, her eyes cold even in the official photo. "Blackwell," Cass said. "That name's familiar." His father was Colonel Robert Blackwell, Served during Desert Storm. Investigated in '92 for unauthorized contact with Iraqi officers. The pieces clicked into place. The investigation was closed for insufficient evidence. The same month, the POW intelligence vanished from classified databases. Garrett finished. I pulled the files after Mitchell went missing. When you know what you're looking for, the pattern is obvious. It's generational. The son is continuing the father's operation. That's what I think. And if Mitchell found proof, they took him to find out how much damage he'd done. Cass moved to the window, looking out over the base. Somewhere down there, 3 officers were going about their duties, confident they'd gotten away with it, confident that no one would connect decades-old betrayals to current crimes. They were wrong. The door opened and Commander Stevens entered, carrying an armload of folders and a laptop. Behind him came a woman in civilian clothes, early 40s, sharp-eyed, moving with the controlled aggression of someone who'd seen combat and remembered its lessons. Admiral Thorne, Stevens said. This is Agent Diana Hartley, NCIS. She's been investigating weapons trafficking across multiple naval installations. When I informed her of your presence, she requested immediate briefing. Hartley set her briefcase on the table and extended her hand. Cass shook it, noting the firm grip and the calluses that suggested regular weapons training. Admiral, Hartley said, I've been tracking a conspiracy for 2 years. Norfolk is the center of it. And if you're here conducting Ghost Protocol, that means the Secretary of the Navy thinks it's bad enough to risk a flag officer. It's worse than bad, Cass said. It's 33 years old and it's already killed 7 Americans that we know of. She told them. Not everything, some details were still classified, even for NCIS, but enough. The Kuwait mission in '91, the documents that burned, 7 POWs who'd been left behind. American officers facilitating arms deals with Iraqi forces. A betrayal that had been buried for 3 decades, and Mitchell Reeves, who'd somehow found proof. When she finished, the room was silent. Hartley was the first to speak. We've traced weapons from Norfolk to Eastern Europe, Bulgaria, Romania, Czech Republic. From there, they disappear into black markets. We've recovered Norfolk-sourced rifles at crime scenes in Paris, Berlin, Stockholm. This isn't petty theft. It's international arms trafficking on a scale that requires serious infrastructure. She pulled up financial records on her tablet. Blackwell, Novak, and Devereaux all have offshore accounts showing deposits that match the timing of weapons discrepancies. Small amounts, 10, 20,000, but consistent. Over 18 months, we're talking about $600,000 split 3 ways. That's their payment, Cass said. But who's paying them? That's what we can't figure out. The money comes through shell companies registered in the Caymans, but the actual source is hidden behind so many layers of legal entities that even our financial crimes unit can't penetrate it. Garrett had been studying Sterling's notebook. Admiral, look at this entry from 3 months ago, February 14th. White van at Warehouse 7, middle of the night. Cass read the notation. 3 days before Mitchell disappeared. And Warehouse 7 is Commander Novak's domain, Garrett added. Supply storage. He has legitimate access 24/7. That's where they're holding Mitchell, Cass said with certainty. You can't know that, Stevens protested. Colonel Sterling documented unusual activity 3 months ago. Test run, probably. They needed to verify they could move someone in and out without triggering alerts. 3 days before Mitchell disappeared, they did it again. That's when they brought him in. Hartley was already pulling up surveillance footage. She scrolled back 6 days, found the timestamp, and there it was. A white panel van entering through the south gate at 02:03 hours. The same contractor plates Sterling had noted months earlier. Driving directly to Warehouse 7, staying 2 hours, leaving. We need to move now, Hartley said. Tactical team can be here in 20 minutes. No. Cass's voice was absolute. Tactical team means sirens, helicopters, overwhelming force. The moment Blackwell and his network see that response, Mitchell dies. They'll have a contingency plan, probably a dead man's switch, something that ensures their secrets die with him. Then what do you suggest? Master Chief Sullivan and I go in, quietly. We verify Mitchell's location and status. Then we extract him before anyone knows we're there. Admiral, with respect, you're a flag officer and he's 65. And between us, we have 70 years of operational experience, Cass interrupted. Special operations training, multiple combat deployments. and a personal investment in this mission that guarantees we won't fail. She turned to Stevens. I need access codes to Warehouse 7. I need the security cameras in that sector to malfunction for 30 minutes, starting at 2200 hours tonight. And I need a medical team standing by. Stevens looked like he wanted to argue, but the expression on Cass's face made it clear that argument would be futile. You'll have it, he said finally. Agent Hartley, I need your team positioned at the south gate. Not close enough to be visible, but close enough to respond if we call for backup. And I need you to prepare arrest warrants for all 3 conspirators. The moment we have Mitchell safe, you move on them simultaneously. Understood. Cass looked at Garrett. Are you sure about this? You have a bad leg, you're past retirement age, and I'm asking you to conduct a direct action mission with less than 12 hours prep time. You're not asking, Garrett said. I'm volunteering. Those 7 POWs from 91, one of them was my cousin. Corporal Anthony Sullivan. He was 22. His mother, my aunt, died last year, still hoping he'd come home. His voice hardened. I've got 33 years of reasons to see this through. So yes, Admiral, I'm sure. The room fell silent at that revelation. Even Hartley looked moved. Then we have work to do, Cass said. Commander Stevens, I need those personnel files. Agent Hartley, I need everything you have on the conspiracy structure. Master Chief, you and I need to plan an infiltration route. We have, she checked her watch, 9 hours until insertion. They scattered to their tasks. Cass found herself alone with Garrett in the conference room, spreading blueprints of Warehouse 7 across the table. Your cousin, she said quietly. I didn't know. How could you? Tony was listed as KIA in February 91, same month as the Kuwait mission. I always wondered if there was a connection, but I could never prove anything. He traced a route on the blueprint. If Mitchell really found evidence about what happened to those 7 men, then we're going to make sure their families finally get the truth. They worked in silence for several minutes, planning approach vectors, identifying choke points, memorizing the warehouse layout. It was familiar work, the kind of mission preparation they'd both done hundreds of times. But this time felt different. Personal. Cass, Garrett said finally, those 3 guards at the checkpoint, what's going to happen to them? She didn't look up from the blueprints. I'll be conducting formal interviews this afternoon. Briggs is done court-martial, dishonorable discharge, likely confinement. Torres is done other than honorable discharge, possible criminal charges for the privacy violations. Hudson, she paused. Hudson gets a second chance. He's young, he was following bad leadership, and he showed moral discomfort throughout. But he has to testify against Briggs. Full truth, no holding back. And Commander Winters, letter of reprimand, permanent record. It won't end her career immediately, but it caps her progression. She'll never make captain. Some would say you're being harsh. Some people didn't spend 37 minutes being treated like trash by personnel who swore oaths to serve with honor. Cass finally looked up. I don't enjoy destroying careers, Garrett, but I won't protect people who abuse their authority. The uniform means something. Or it should. It does to you. And to you. That's why we're still doing this at 57 and 65, instead of retired and fishing somewhere. Garrett smiled slightly. I hate fishing. Me too. Commander Stevens returned with the files. Cass spent the next 3 hours conducting interviews, and with each one she felt the weight of judgment settle more heavily on her shoulders. Marcus Briggs came first. He entered Stevens' office like a man walking to his execution, which wasn't far from the truth. Cass sat behind the desk, Garrett standing to her right, silent witness. Sergeant Briggs, she began pulling up his service record on the laptop. 12 years in security positions, promoted twice, reprimanded once in 2018 for excessive force during a detention. She turned the laptop so he could see the screen. Video footage from 2018. A 17-year-old girl crying, forgetting her ID card. Briggs throwing her against a wall. The sickening thud, the way she crumpled. The official report says she became combative, Cass said. But the original witness statement describes a scared teenager who was apologizing while you screamed in her face about respecting authority. Briggs stared at the video, his face gray. I've found 2 other incidents with similar patterns. Excessive force, vulnerable targets, official records that were modified to protect you. Cass closed the laptop. So I'm going to ask you a question, Sergeant, and I want you to think very carefully before answering. Why did you treat me the way you did this morning? The silence stretched. When Briggs finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Because I could. Because you had power and I had none, Cass said. Because there were no consequences, no oversight, no one who would believe my word against yours. She stood. You're going to be court-martialed, assault, abuse of authority, pattern of misconduct spanning at least 6 years. You'll likely serve confinement time, and you'll receive a dishonorable discharge, which means no pension, no benefits, no veteran status. Your wife and son will pay the price for your choices. Admiral, please. You should have thought about them before you spent 12 years terrorizing people who couldn't defend themselves. Dismissed. MPs escorted him out. Cass sat back down and took a breath. One down. Jessica Torres came next, already crying mascara-streaked. Cass pulled up her Instagram account without preamble. 217 photographs over 3 years, Cass said. Each one a violation of privacy regulations, each caption designed to mock. She scrolled through the feed. This one from last month. Elderly immigrant crying during a search. Your caption, when you can't even English. Torres sobbed harder. You have a daughter, Cass said. Emma, 4 years old. Please. And those people had children too. Families. Lives that matter just as much as yours. But you turned their humiliation into entertainment for internet strangers. Cass closed the laptop. Other than honorable discharge. Effective immediately. Criminal charges are being considered for the privacy violations. If convicted, you're looking at fines and possibly jail time. Your security clearance is revoked, which means no federal employment, probably no private sector security work either. My daughter will hopefully learn better values from whoever gets custody. Cass's voice was steel. Because right now, you're teaching her that cruelty is acceptable if it gets you likes. Dismissed. Torres was escorted out, still crying. Cass took another breath. 2 down. Tyler Hudson entered with Garrett at his side. The Master Chief had requested to be present for this one. The kid was 21, terrified, drowning in guilt. Private Hudson, Cass said. You hesitated before searching me. You apologized. That wasn't Sergeant Briggs's training, that was you. Hudson nodded miserably. You also kicked me, Cass continued. Deliberately, on Briggs's orders. I know, I'm sorry, You wanted to fit in. You didn't want to be called soft. You were scared of being punished for doing the right thing. Yes, ma'am. Cass leaned forward. I'm going to give you a choice, Private. You can accept administrative action and testify fully against Briggs. Every detail. No holding back. If you do that, you'll remain in the Navy, but you'll be transferred away from security duties for at least a year. You'll undergo counseling on ethical decision-making, and you'll have to live with what you did. Hudson's eyes widened. You're not discharging me. Not if you choose correctly right now. But understand this, if you lie, if you minimize, if you protect Briggs in any way, I will personally ensure you're discharged and prosecuted. This is your one chance. Take it or lose it. I'll take it, Hudson said immediately. I'll testify. Everything, I swear. Garrett spoke for the first time. Don't waste this, son. Good men who make bad choices can still become good men. But you have to choose it every single day from now on. Hudson nodded, and for the first time since entering the checkpoint, he stood a little straighter. A weight lifting. After he left, Garrett turned to Cass. Thank you for that. For what? For remembering that not everyone who fails is irredeemable. Hudson made a mistake, but he's not Briggs. No, Cass agreed. He's not. And maybe in 20 years, he'll be the Master Chief who stops the next Marcus Briggs before he can hurt anyone. Commander Winter's interview was brief. Cass presented the facts in proper order, given without verification of identity failure, to ensure proper protocols were followed. Dismissive treatment of a detainee based on appearance rather than evidence. You're receiving a letter of reprimand, Cass said. It will be in your permanent file. It will likely prevent you from making captain. You'll spend the rest of your career wondering what you might have achieved if you'd taken 30 seconds to verify identity before ordering a strip search. Winter's face was stone. Is there anything I can do to mitigate? No, the damage is done. Learn from it, Commander. That's all you can do now. After Winters left, Cass found herself alone in Stephen's office, staring at the files, feeling the weight of 4 ruined careers pressing down on her chest. Garrett entered with coffee. Real coffee, not the sludge from the break room. "You look like you need this," he said, handing her a cup. "I hate this part," Cass admitted. "The judgment, the life-altering decisions. But you do it anyway, because someone has to. Because without accountability, the Marcus Briggses of the world keep terrorizing people forever. Doesn't make it easier. It's not supposed to be easy. If it was, you'd be the kind of person who shouldn't be making these decisions." Garrett sat across from her. "Cass, in 90 minutes, we're going to infiltrate a warehouse to rescue Mitchell. We might get shot. We might fail. But right now, in this moment, you just stopped 4 people from continuing to abuse their power. That matters." She sipped the coffee. It was good, strong, the kind that reminded you that you were still alive. "Tell me about your cousin," she said. "Anthony." Garrett's expression shifted, grief old but never quite healed. "Tony was the baby of our family, youngest of 4 brothers. He joined the Marines because he wanted to prove he was tough, that he wasn't just the kid everyone protected." Garrett's voice was steady but quiet. "He deployed to Kuwait in November 1990, wrote letters home every week. Then in February 91, the letters stopped. A month later, we got notice. Killed in action. Body not recovered. Did you suspect?" "Not at first, but years later, after I'd done enough deployments to understand how things work, I started asking questions. The timeline didn't make sense. The location where he supposedly died was nowhere near active combat. And the official report was..." He paused. "Too clean, too simple. Like someone had written it to close the file rather than explain what happened. And your aunt never stopped hoping. Even when everyone told her he was gone, she kept his room exactly as he'd left it. Set a place for him at every holiday dinner. Believed he'd come home." Garrett's jaw tightened. "She died last year. Heart attack. I was with her at the end. You know what her last words were? 'Tell Tony I waited.' She died still believing he might walk through the door." Cass felt something crack in her chest. 7 POWs. 7 families who'd waited. 7 mothers, fathers, siblings, children who'd never gotten the truth. Until now. "We're going to get Mitchell," she said. "And then we're going to find out exactly what happened to Tony and the other 6. And we're going to make sure every family gets answers. That's a promise, Garrett." "I know it is. That's why I trust you." At 21:45 hours, Cass and Garrett left through a side exit, dressed in maintenance coveralls with contractor IDs that would pass casual inspection. They carried toolboxes containing more than tools, flashlights, bolt cutters, first aid supplies, and 2 M9 pistols that officially didn't exist. The night was humid clouds obscuring the moon. Perfect conditions for an operation that required darkness. They moved through the base on foot, 2 maintenance workers heading to a late-night repair call. Occasionally, a vehicle passed. Nobody gave them a second glance. Warehouse 7 sat isolated at the edge of the supply district, a squat concrete structure surrounded by empty parking spaces. A single light burned above the entrance. No vehicles, no obvious security, but Cass's instincts screamed warning. "Too quiet," Garrett murmured. "Agreed. Motion sensors." "Disabled as of 5 minutes ago." Stevens came through. They approached from the west using shadows. The warehouse had 3 doors: main entrance, loading dock, emergency exit. Cass pointed to the emergency exit. Garrett nodded. The door was locked but not alarmed. Garrett had it open in 15 seconds. They slipped inside. The interior was vast and dark, lit only by red emergency lighting. Rows of supply crates stretched toward distant walls, and somewhere in this maze, Mitchell Reeves was waiting. They moved through the aisles, weapons drawn. Cass's ears tracked ambient sounds, climate control hum, metal ticking, distant base traffic. Nothing suggesting human presence. Garrett touched her shoulder and pointed. Light beneath a door at the far end. Office space. They approached carefully. 20 feet from the door, Cass heard voices. 2 men, arguing about something. She held up 2 fingers. Garrett nodded. They reached the door. Cass positioned herself on the hinge side. Garrett took the opposite position. She counted down. 3, 2, 1. Garrett kicked the door inward. Cass went through low and left Garrett high and right weapons up. Two men, one by a desk, one next to a chair where Mitchell sat bound and gagged but alive. Both reached for weapons but froze when they saw two pistols aimed at center mass. "Don't," Cass said quietly. "Hands up." They complied. Garrett secured them with zip ties while Cass moved to Mitchell. His face was bruised, one eye, swollen lips split, but he was conscious. When she removed his gag, he actually smiled. "Knew you'd come," he rasped. "Can you walk?" "Yes, ma'am." She cut his bonds and helped him stand. He swayed but caught his balance. "Admiral," Mitchell said urgently, "Blackwell knows about the assessment. He's been tracking you since the checkpoint. This was—" The warehouse lights came on all at once, blinding. Cass and Garrett spun weapons up, but a voice from the entrance stopped them. "Drop your weapons, now, or everyone dies." 6 men emerged from the shadows, all armed with rifles, all positioned with clear fields of fire. Professional, military contractors. In the center, Lieutenant Harrison Blackwell stepped into view. Soft around the middle, but his eyes were calculating. "Admiral Thorne," he said pleasantly, "I've been expecting you." Cass didn't lower her weapon, neither did Garrett. But the math was brutal. 6 rifles against 2 pistols. They might take down 2, maybe 3, before getting cut apart. "How did you know?" Cass asked, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "The camera malfunction was too convenient," Blackwell said, moving closer, but staying behind his men. "Too perfectly timed. Commander Stevens is predictable. And when I heard about your little performance at the checkpoint this morning," he smiled, "I knew Ghost Protocol when I saw it. My father dealt with your assessments before. He taught me the patterns. Your father was a traitor. My father was a businessman. He recognized that ideology is expensive, but merchandise always sells." Blackwell gestured with his pistol. "Now drop your weapons or Captain Reeves dies first, then you, then the Master Chief." Cass met Garrett's eyes. He gave the slightest shake of his head. "Not yet. Not surrendering yet." "There's no extraction coming," Blackwell continued. "My people are monitoring all base communications. NCIS thinks they're positioned for a rescue. They're actually being watched by a counter-surveillance team. If they move, my people move. Everyone dies." "Then what's your play?" Cass asked, buying time, her mind racing through options. "You can't kill a rear admiral and 2 other officers and just walk away." "I don't need to walk away, Admiral. I need 48 hours. By then this warehouse burns with you inside it. Tragic accident, faulty wiring, bodies burned beyond recognition. And I'm already in Moscow with enough money to live very comfortably for the rest of my life. The network will hunt you. The network is me. My father built it. I inherited it. And now I'm cashing out." Blackwell's smile widened. "Last chance. Weapons down." Cass calculated odds, angles, possibilities. All of them bad. Her earpiece crackled so faint only she could hear it. Hartley's voice barely a whisper. "Ghost Actual Overwatch has you on thermal. Stand by for intervention. 5 seconds." Cass's eyes flicked to Garrett. She tapped her ear twice. His expression didn't change, but she saw understanding. "You know what's interesting, Lieutenant?" Cass said, her voice conversational, buying the last few seconds. "Your father made one critical mistake in 1991. He underestimated the people he betrayed, thought they'd give up, thought they'd forget. Ancient history. History never dies. It just waits for the right moment to." The warehouse's power died. Complete darkness. Emergency lights would take 5 seconds to activate. 5 seconds was eternity. Hartley had cut the main breaker from outside, her NCIS team monitoring through thermal scopes, seeing the standoff develop, making the tactical decision to give Cass and Garrett the advantage of darkness. Cass dropped flat, rolled left, came up firing at muzzle flashes. Garrett went right, his weapon barking in the darkness. Automatic fire tore the air where they'd been standing. Men shouted. Someone screamed. The emergency lights kicked on red and dim. Garrett was down behind a crate. Cass's heart stopped, not him, not after everything, but then he moved, slow but deliberate. His hand came up with his M9 and he fired twice with the precision of 4 decades of training. 2 of Blackwell's men dropped. "Body armor." Garrett gasped, his voice strained but alive. Blood seeped through his coveralls at the right shoulder. Hurts like hell, but I'm good. Relief flooded through Cass for half a second before training reasserted itself. She shifted position, firing at the third mercenary, who was repositioning for a better angle. The round caught him in the leg. He went down. 3 hostiles down, 3 still active, and Blackwell retreating toward the exit. Agent Hartley's voice boomed through a bullhorn from outside. "This is NCIS. The building is surrounded. Drop your weapons and surrender." The remaining mercenaries looked at each other, looked at their fallen comrades, looked at Blackwell running for the door. The calculation shifted from profit to survival. They dropped their rifles and raised their hands. But Blackwell made it to the exit. Cass sprinted after him, her legs pumping, lungs burning, 57 years old, and running like she was 24 again in Kuwait. Blackwell burst through the exit into the parking area where a black SUV waited, engine running. He was 10 feet from the vehicle when Colonel Benjamin Sterling's wheelchair rolled into view, blocking his path. Blackwell skidded to a stop, pistol coming up, but Sterling was faster. A Colt 1911, old and immaculately maintained, appeared in the elderly colonel's hand with the speed of someone who'd been drawing weapons since before Blackwell was born. "I wouldn't," Sterling said calmly. "I've had 70 years to get good at this, son." Blackwell hesitated. Cass closed the distance weapon trained on his back. "Drop it," she commanded. The pistol clattered to the pavement. Blackwell raised his hands. NCIS agents swarmed from the darkness, taking him into custody with efficient brutality. Sterling looked at Cass and nodded once. "Figured you might need backup," he said. "Made some calls. Turns out this old veteran still has friends." Cass looked around and saw them. A dozen elderly men, most in wheelchairs or using canes, all armed, all positioned to provide cover fire if needed. Korean War vets, Vietnam vets, Desert Storm vets. A generation that remembered what duty meant and hadn't forgotten how to fight. "Thank you, Colonel," she said quietly. "Thank us by finishing what you started, Admiral. Those 7 POWs deserve justice. Don't let them down." She wouldn't. She'd come too far. Carried the burden too long to fail now. Inside the warehouse, medics were treating Garrett's shoulder wound. The round had punched through muscle but missed bone and major vessels. Painful but survivable. He sat against a crate, his face pale but his eyes clear. "Through and through," the medic reported. "You're going to need surgery to clean it properly, but you're stable." "Good," Garrett said, "because we're not done yet." Cass knelt beside him. "How bad, really?" "Hurts like someone punched a hole in my shoulder with a railroad spike. But I've had worse." He managed a pained smile. "Kuwait was worse. At least this time I didn't need you to drag me to the helicopter." "Don't tempt me." Mitchell Reeves sat nearby drinking water while a medic examined his injuries. Despite the beating he'd taken, his eyes were sharp with the kind of focus that came from knowing you'd survived something you shouldn't have. "Admiral," Mitchell said, "I need to tell you what I found. Before they—" He paused, swallowing. "Before they make me forget." Cass moved to him. "What did you find, Mitchell?" "Everything. The whole conspiracy. It's all on a flash drive hidden in my apartment. Taped behind the bathroom mirror." His words came faster, now urgent. "Documents. Testimony from Iraqi prison guards who were paid to keep quiet. Names of every American officer involved in the betrayal. And locations." "Locations!" Cass felt her pulse accelerate. "Mitchell, where are they? Where are the 7 POWs? Mitchell's eyes filled with tears. "Syrian prison, Al-Qiyam facility near the Lebanese border. American officers sold them in 1992 as Iraqi war criminals. Payment was weapons deals worth $2 million, plus ongoing trafficking contracts." The words hit like physical blows. 33 years of hope, of searching, of refusing to give up. And the answer was they'd been sold like merchandise. "They died there," Mitchell continued, his voice breaking. "All 7, between 1993 and 1995. Malnutrition, disease, beatings. We knew they were alive, and we left them." Garrett made a sound like he'd been gutted. His hand found Cass's gripping hard enough to hurt. "There's more," Mitchell said. "One of them. Corporal Anthony Sullivan. He's my cousin." Garrett finished, his voice hollow. "Tony was my cousin. He was 22. His mother, my aunt, she died last year, still hoping he'd come home." Silence descended. Even the NCIS agents stopped their work, feeling the weight of revelation. Cass stood slowly, her body moving on autopilot while her mind processed implications. 7 men, 7 families who'd waited decades, 7 graves that had never been properly honored because the truth had been buried. No more. Agent Hartley, Cass said, her voice carrying across the warehouse. I need you to arrest Commander Richard Novak and Captain Sarah Devereaux immediately. Simultaneous takedowns. No warnings. Already in motion, Admiral. Teams are moving now. And contact the State Department. We're going to Syria to bring 7 men home. Admiral, Syria doesn't have diplomatic relations. I don't care. Those men were betrayed by American officers and left to die in foreign prisons. We're going to recover their remains, identify them, and bring them home for burial with full honors. Whatever it takes. Hartley studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. I'll make it happen. The next 72 hours passed in a controlled storm of briefings, arrests, and revelations that shook the Navy to its foundation. Novak and Devereaux were taken into custody without incident. Devereaux tried to run, made it 3 blocks before being tackled by NCIS agents. Novak simply sat at his desk and waited as if he'd always known this day would come. The flash drive from Mitchell's apartment contained evidence of a conspiracy that stretched back 33 years and implicated 17 officers across 5 bases. Most were retired, now living comfortably on government pensions, confident they'd gotten away with it. They were wrong. The arrests made national news. The weapons trafficking network was dismantled in coordinated raids across 3 continents. And slowly, painfully, the full truth about the 7 POWs emerged. Sergeant Michael Brennan, Corporal David Hutchinson, Private First Class Thomas McAllister, Specialist James Kowalski, Private Robert Carlisle, Sergeant First Class William Drake, Corporal Anthony Sullivan. 7 names that should have come home in 1991 but didn't. 7 men who'd been sold for profit and abandoned to die. The remains were recovered through diplomatic channels that required leverage Cass didn't want to examine too carefully. Threats were made. Favors were called in. People in very high places decided that this particular injustice could not stand. DNA confirmation took 3 weeks. The results were conclusive. They were coming home. USS Gerald R. Ford. 8 weeks later, the deck of America's newest aircraft carrier was filled with personnel standing at attention under a gray sky that threatened rain but held off as if even the weather recognized the solemnity of the moment. 7 flag-draped caskets sat in a row, each attended by an honor guard in dress blues, so crisp they seemed to cut the air. 7 families stood nearby, some with children who'd grown up without fathers, some with spouses who'd remarried but never forgotten, some with siblings who'd spent 33 years refusing to believe their brother was really gone. Garrett's aunt, Corporal Sullivan's mother, had died the year before, but her daughter Garrett's cousin Maria stood in her place, 58 years old now, holding the folded flag that had been draped on her brother's coffin at his first funeral in 1991. The empty coffin they'd buried when they'd had no body to put in it. Now they had a body. Now they had truth. Cass stood at the podium in her dress uniform, medals, gleaming face composed, but her eyes told a different story. Grief, fury, relief that the burden she'd carried since Kuwait could finally be set down. We gather today, she began, her voice carrying across the deck, to honor 7 men who died twice, once in Syrian prisons, betrayed by the officers they trusted, and once in our memories when we accepted that they were gone without demanding to know why. The wind picked up, tugging at flags and uniform covers. These 7 men were soldiers, sailors, Marines, Americans. They deployed in defense of their country. They were captured during combat operations. And instead of being rescued, they were sold, traded like merchandise for weapons deals and trafficking contracts, abandoned by the system that promised to never leave anyone behind. Garrett stood beside her, his right arm in a sling, his face carved from stone. Behind them, the crew of the Gerald R. Ford stood at attention, 5,000 sailors bearing witness. For 33 years, I've carried the guilt of that night in Kuwait, Cass continued, of finding evidence that could have saved them and watching it burn, of knowing someone betrayed us but not being able to prove it, of promises made to men I never met that I couldn't keep. Her voice cracked slightly. She steadied it. Today we keep those promises. Today we bring them home. Today we acknowledge that they deserve better, that their families deserve better, that this country which asked them to serve owed them more than betrayal and silence. The honor guards came to attention. A 21-gun salute echoed across the water. Taps played the mournful notes carrying across the deck. Then one by one, Cass called each name. Each family approached. Each received the Medal of Honor their loved one had been posthumously awarded the nation's highest military decoration, given not just for the way they died, but for the courage they'd shown in captivity, the refusal to break even when their own country had broken its promises to them. Garrett pinned his cousin's medal on Maria. She clutched it to her chest and wept, and Garrett held her while his own tears fell. When the ceremony ended and the families had departed, when the deck was empty, except for Cass and Garrett, and the echo of taps still hanging in the air, they stood together watching the sun break through the clouds. "We finished it," Garrett said quietly, "after 33 years. "We finished this part," Cass corrected. "The trials are still pending. There will be more investigations, more revelations. But the POWs are home. Yes, they're home." Silence stretched between them, comfortable and earned. A voice interrupted. "Admiral Thorne." They turned. Seaman Brianna Walsh stood at attention now. Petty Officer 3rd Class Walsh, the promotion recently awarded. The challenge coin Cass had given her hung on a chain around her neck, visible against her dress uniform. "Petty Officer Walsh," Cass said, "what can I do for you?" "I wanted to thank you, ma'am, for the second chance, for believing I could be better than what I almost became that day at the checkpoint. You gave yourself the second chance by making the right choice when it mattered. I've been accepted to Officer Candidate School." Bree said, her voice steady with pride. "Master Chief Sullivan wrote my recommendation. He said I remind him of someone he served with in Kuwait. Said that's the highest compliment he could give." Cass felt something warm in her chest. Legacy, the torch passing to new hands. "He's right," Cass said. "Make us proud, Petty Officer." "I will, ma'am, I promise." After Bree left, another figure approached. Private Tyler Hudson, now Specialist Hudson, after his testimony against Briggs had concluded. He moved with more confidence than he'd had 2 months ago, shoulders back, eyes forward. "Admiral," he said, "Master Chief, I wanted you to know I've been reassigned to JAG as an ethics instructor, teaching new recruits about the chain of command and moral courage." "How's that going?" Garrett asked. "I tell them about you, ma'am, about what happened at the checkpoint, about how one person making the right choice can change everything." Hudson paused. "And I tell them what I did wrong. I don't hide from it. I own it." "Good," Cass said. "That's what growth looks like." "There's something else," Hudson continued. "Sergeant Briggs. He's serving 18 months at Leavenworth. I wrote him a letter, told him I forgave him for putting me in that position, but I also told him that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences." "Did he respond?" "Yes, ma'am. He said he's using the time to think about who he wants to be when he gets out, whether he can be better than who he was." Hudson met her eyes. "I don't know if people can really change, but I have to believe they can, because I did." After Hudson left, Garrett turned to Cass. "You gave those kids more than second chances. You gave them a map for how to be better. They chose to follow it. That's the hard part. What about you? What happens now? Pearl Harbor, another assessment in 2 weeks. The security failure patterns extend beyond Norfolk." "Want company?" Cass smiled. "Always, Master Chief." Her phone buzzed. A text from Admiral Warren Court-Martials concluded. "Blackwell life without parole. Novak and Devereaux, 25 years each. Dorsey, Preston, Vickers, the retired officers' life sentences. All stripped of rank and pensions. It's done." She showed Garrett the message. He read it and nodded slowly. "Justice," he said, "as close as we get to it." Another text came through, this one from Mitchell Reeves, now recovered and back on duty Admiral. "Found something else in the files. You need to see this. Can you meet me at Bethesda tomorrow? It's about the network's financial backers, the real ones." Cass replied, 1400 hours. My office." She looked at Garrett. "It's not over." "Is it ever?" "Not while we're still breathing." They walked toward the ship's interior together, two warriors who'd finally finished the mission that had defined their careers, ready to start the next one. Behind them, the 7 caskets were loaded with care onto transport vehicles. The honor guards saluted one final time. The flags snapped in the wind. Epilogue. 5 years later, the ceremony was smaller this time, more intimate. Master Chief Garrett Sullivan's retirement after 45 years of service. Not the vast carrier deck ceremony of the POW Memorial, but a conference room at Naval Special Warfare Command with 50 people who actually mattered. Cass stood at the podium now, Vice Admiral Cassandra Thorne, 3 stars instead of 2, and looked at the man who'd saved her life in Kuwait and trusted her enough to test her judgment in Norfolk. Garrett Sullivan, she began, is the finest enlisted leader I've ever served with. He's also stubborn, occasionally insubordinate, and has a habit of volunteering for missions that would send most 65-year-olds running for their retirement home. Laughter rippled through the room. But he's also the man who taught me that real leadership isn't about rank. It's about character. It's about choosing to do right when wrong would be easier. It's about carrying promises for 33 years until you finally get the chance to keep them. She pinned the final medal on his uniform, the Navy Distinguished Service Medal. Garrett's eyes were wet, but his voice was steady when he stepped to the podium. I spent 45 years in this uniform, he said, deployed to 17 countries, served under 11 presidents, trained thousands of sailors. But the operation I'm most proud of wasn't in a combat zone. It was here, at Norfolk, when a 57-year-old admiral disguised herself as a homeless woman to expose corruption and trusted an old Master Chief to have her back one more time. He looked at Cass. Thank you for letting me finish what we started. Thank you for bringing Tony home. Thank you for never giving up. The room erupted in applause. After the ceremony at the reception, Cass found Lieutenant Brianna Walsh, no longer seaman, now a commissioned officer after completing OCS at the top of her class. Lieutenant Walsh, Cass said, how's your first command assignment? Challenging, ma'am. I'm running the checkpoint at Pearl Harbor, implementing new training protocols based on, she paused smiling, based on lessons learned from Norfolk. Any homeless admirals try to test you yet? Not yet, but if one does, I'll know how to treat them. With dignity, with respect, like the person they are, not what they appear to be. That's all any of us can ask. Later, Cass stood on the building's roof with Garrett watching the sun set over Coronado. Below them, SEAL candidates ran beach drills, their instructors shouting corrections that carried on the wind. Do you miss it? Cass asked. The active duty? Every day, Garrett admitted. But I'm teaching now, passing it on. That matters too. What will you do, really, or fish probably? Finally learn to like it. He smiled. And consult. Admiral Warren asked me to help design better assessment protocols for Ghost program. Apparently having someone who's been on both sides of the test is valuable. You're not retiring. You're just changing uniforms. Neither are you. 3 stars and you're still running field assessments. When do you actually sit behind a desk? When they make me, which won't be soon if I have anything to say about it. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mitchell Reeves, now a commander and teaching at the Naval Academy Admiral. New class of midshipmen just asked about the Norfolk assessment. Told them the whole story. They want to meet you. Any chance you could speak at the Academy next month? Cass replied. Send me the date. I'll be there. She showed Garrett the message. They want to hear about Norfolk. Good. They should know what happened. They should know that the uniform means something. That promises matter. That 7 men died because officers forgot those lessons. And 7 families waited 33 years because we failed them. But we didn't fail in the end. No, Garrett agreed. In the end, we kept our promises. They stood in silence as the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Below them, the next generation of warriors trained. Above them, the stars began to appear. And somewhere, 7 men who died twice could finally rest, knowing their country had remembered them. Knowing they'd been brought home. Cass's phone buzzed one more time. Admiral Warren, Pearl Harbor assessment scheduled. 3 weeks, same protocol. Are you ready? She replied with one word, always. Garrett saw her expression change. Another mission. Another mission. Want company. I thought you were retired. I said I was teaching. Never said I was done. He grinned. Besides, someone needs to watch your back. Might as well be the old Master Chief who's been doing it for 38 years. You were 32 when we started, and you were 24. Now look at us, still fighting, still refusing to quit. Should we quit? Garrett looked at the SEAL candidates below at the flag, snapping in the wind at the ocean that had been his life for 4.5 decades. No, he said finally. Not while there's still work to do. Not while there are still people who need someone to stand up for them. Not while the uniform still means something. Then I guess we're both staying stubborn. I guess we are. They walked back inside together past walls covered with photos of operations and operators, victories and losses, promises kept and promises still waiting. The building was emptying now, people heading home to families to live outside the uniform. But Cass and Garrett remained. Because for them, the uniform wasn't something you wore. It was something you were. And the promises they'd made to 7 POWs to each other, to everyone who'd ever trusted them, those promises didn't end with retirement or age or time. Those promises lasted forever. In 3 weeks, they'd go to Pearl Harbor. They'd put on their disguises. They'd test another base expose, more corruption, make more careers tremble. Because that's what Ghost Protocol was. Not punishment, not revenge, accountability. The reminder that no matter how much power you had, no matter how high you climbed, you were still accountable to the people you served, to the uniform you wore, to the promises you made. And if you forgot that, if you abused your authority, if you treated people like they didn't matter, well, Ghost Protocol would remind you, and Rear Admiral Cassandra Thorne would be watching, always watching, dedicated to all prisoners of war who waited for rescue that never came, to the families who never stopped hoping, and to the operators who refused to leave anyone behind, no matter how long it takes. We will never forget. We will never stop searching. We will bring you home.